And is with us now. All right. Again, if true, is what Milley did legal?
Leland, thanks so much for having me on. I think, as reported, Chairman Milley had a good intention but the wrong execution. If he was concerned that President Trump was going to make an improvident use of a nuclear weapon, what he needed to do was encourage his civilian superiors, such as the acting Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller, Vice President Mike Pence, to have the cabinet meet and consider under Section 4 of the 25th Amendment of the Constitution to have the president declared unfit to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Yeah, there's a constitutional procedure here that could have been followed.
Yeah, we have no evidence that anybody in the cabinet ever met for the 25th Amendment. We're going to put up the chain of command because that's what this all comes down to. Obviously, the president is the commander-in-chief. Lawful orders go through him down to the Secretary of Defense. And it's a little complicated here on the screen, but if you look at the little lines, they go over to the Unified Combatant Commands, which is actually where nuclear weapons are launched from. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, as important as he is, does not sit in that chain of command. So help us parse in the best possible light for General Milley, when he said, I need to be on the net, what would that mean?
So, Leland, you're exactly right. The chain of command goes from the commander-in-chief to the Secretary of Defense to, typically in this situation, the Strategic Command Commander, or possibly one of the regional combatant commanders in Pacific Command or European Command, for example. And they would have the launch authority delegated by the president, ordered by the president. Now, every day, the National Military Command Center practices nuclear warning and nuclear launch procedures. And on a regular basis, there's a communications test of all the senior officials, cabinet members, National Security Council members, including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who would advise the president in the event of a nuclear crisis, if there was time to have such a discussion.
Interesting.
So if Chairman Milley was just saying, remember, there's supposed to be a nuclear fires call with certain NSC members, I'm supposed to be on it, that's exactly correct. If he was saying to the National Military Command Center, don't transmit an order from the President of the United States to the Commander of Strategic Command to launch a weapon, I think that was illegal. It may have been more.
And we rightly point out, we don't know what was actually said. There's some reporting that sources close to Milley are disputing this and saying that he simply said we need to follow procedure. It brings up, though, an important point of what happened in the days before this January 9th meeting, which was Nancy Pelosi calling the chairman and saying, we must take the nuclear codes away from President Trump. How do we take the codes away? How do we make sure he doesn't launch a weapon? Isn't that the Speaker of the House, in a way, doing something that's not really good about asking how to take power away from the president?
I agree. The person that she needed to have that conversation with was Vice President Pence. She is the third in presidential succession. And I think it would not be right to punch down to the uniformed military and say, you have to take the responsibility of taking the biscuit, as it's called, with the nuclear launch codes, and the football away from the president. But rather,
quick,
go
Kevin,
to the constitutional officer.
I only got about 30 seconds. Colby had a bigger problem with the call with the Chinese than with the nuclear discussion. Doesn't those kind of calls happen all the time, even between staunch enemies on the back channel, so to speak?
There's calls all the time about deconfliction to make sure things that don't escalate, but saying that you would warn the Chinese in advance of an American attack is odd and unprecedented, and one of the things I think Senate Armed Services will want to get under oath about exactly what happened there.
Yeah, exactly what the words were, and already we're understanding that out of the Pentagon there's some dispute in terms of exactly what was said versus what was transcribed in the book. Kevin, lots to talk about and lots to learn. Thank you.
Thanks, Leland.
All right. Well, those were troubles with the last administration, and there's some big troubles with this administration. As much as the White House wants Afghanistan to go